はい、どうもありがとうございました。
Thank you very much for your presentation. In this panel discussion, I get a little bit worried. I don't know how can I manage this. So the original idea is like, and we have some of the universe art museum like and for exhibit, and we call that living and then also eating. And then also clothing. However, and for this, and art and culture are going to be in the inhabitant part, and for living, and for food, that's a gastronomy, and for living is architecture of the Mars and Mr. Tom SACHS, and for the culture. So those are the ones taken into the consideration. So Mr. SACHS and for the art presentation is very witty and very much humorous, and very much of the playful spirit is there. So the human beings is not just eating and living. And then to be a human being as a condition have to be with the humanity is in there. It's like human-like. And there's Johann Hyojin, and then here is the philosopher say the human being is the animal to play. So that means if it's a culture of a human being, so of course that enjoyment or the playfulness is required in the people in the space as well. So this is my idea. So from that point of view, the first, I raise some questions to you, to everybody, for each other, maybe. And then probably you can just raise the questions, each other, of the panelists to a panelist as well. So you don't need to wait for my question. So regarding Tom SACHS, so I have a question to you. Why? And why you just create your object related to the space like that? Why you just create so many objects for the space?
My job as an artist is to educate and entertain myself. And exploring different worlds is the sort of the fundamental issue of our time. You know, I come from the United States, where the best art is made by its biggest tragedy, the diaspora, the African diaspora, where people were abducted from Africa and brought to the New World to be enslaved and build this great superpower that could eventually go to the moon and kill God. And through this tragedy comes the greatest art, and these things go hand in hand. So I'm never going to miss an opportunity to share the joy in that, and the sorrow mix at the same time. That's the human experience. You know, but for me, it's about sculpture, and the space program and how we deal with new worlds and old worlds is the ultimate armature or structure for understanding those things. I could go on endlessly as dominant.
But you made the sculpture of Challenger.
Yes, yeah. So you'll see at the Mori Art Center. Has anyone gone over there and seen the amazing, the world's largest model of the space shuttle system that's at the Mori Art Center? And for me, it's made of paper, and it's over 2 meters high, and it's the most elaborate model of this system ever built, except for the one that went into space, obviously. And the space shuttle was a sort of a symbol of institutional compromise. It was this thing that went up and down, and I still don't really know what it did, and I'm kind of a space enthusiast. I've been studying it, but I don't really know anyone who really knows what it did either. I think Nixon liked it because he thought he could capture Russian spy satellites and bring them back to Earth. I think that's why they got the funding for it, but no one really knows beyond that. Maybe you guys have researched it and you can fill me in. But it's not so much about the tragedy of the Challenger as it is as much about the fastest machine, the space shuttle, moving on the slowest machine, the crawler. and that's the title of it, is the crawler.
But the space shuttle is a failed. It's kind of a failed project.
It is, but it's not failed in the 2 disasters. Out of 130-something missions, only 2 of them blew up. Those are pretty good odds, considering it's a rocket, like it's a controlled explosion. To me, the failure is that it didn't go anywhere. It just went up and down, and it didn't lead to anything. And that we had this amazing start of the Apollo space program, where we went to the moon. Like 6 times we played golf there. I mean, we dominated the moon. But then we wound up with this flying toilet that just went back and forth, and there was nothing to it. So I couldn't help but see the tragedy and the humiliation of this, like this great nation and this great planet that achieved this that then stopped. So the idea of going to Mars and Europe and other planets is very conceptual. We don't really, we have the ideas and the ability to do it, is demonstrated very well tonight, but we are lacking in the war. Maybe if China gets off its ass and starts a new space program, we'll have a space race, and you guys will get to, your dreams will come true.
Any questions of each other?
I actually have a question for you, because I mean, part of the story of the space program and space exploration is dreaming and the power of imagination, in this case by engineers. And I was so struck in all these conversations about our technology-driven society. That somehow seems to be missing. We have self-driving cars, but we can't dream of a world where we can house people. You know, there's like a disconnect. And I was never a space geek. That's why I got into it in the last year. Seeing the International Space Station made me like wake up again to, we can do amazing things on this planet. It was like this beacon of optimism. So I'm just, how does that come out in your art, and maybe how do you guys see that? Is there still this optimism around that program as opposed to our sort of doldrums of AI, smart cities, and self-driving cars? Is that too much to ask for space?
Well, I mean,
is it a question to the Mr.
Well, no, yeah, Tom and Melody, because you guys had to have a lot of optimism, put all this time in to something that's pretty hypothetical, and it's a symbol in your work, I guess, a lot.
well, you know, Buckminster Fuller thought that no house should cost or weigh more than a brand new Cadillac, which is the biggest thing that you could buy that moved around. To me, it always boils down to living in New York City, or Tokyo for that matter, to real estate and dollars and cents. So the space race worked because there was a war, an economic war, and threat of communism. So it's just about motivation. And you know, some of your projects are great because they motivate ideas and things that we're afraid of, but we need dollars and cents to really push things along.
Yeah.
It's true. It does kind of come down to funding when it comes to aerospace. And I mean, we can get to Mars today. It really is just a matter of funding. And it's true. And I think that pushing towards theoretical projects of this sort allow others to dream
論理
in
的
addition to
な
ourselves.
プロジェクトというのがあります。そしてその他はまだ夢物語というところもあります。で、私の方では
Just having, you know, the NASA opening up the competition like that was very symbolic.
出したというところは一つ大きな
Centennial Challenge is basically opening up the door for idea from the general public, right? So it's not, you know, the NASA engineers, you know, it's for designers and architects like us, which is, you know, I think their kind of attitude is more opening up, and well, one reason might be the race is heating up again. You know, who's going to go to the Mars, you know, first? That's one thing, but I think they're more collaborative with you know, new ideas and also private sectors and so forth. So I think it's changing because they used to be more secluded, you know, like us, almost like a military, like you said, you know, like an institution. I think it's to me it was quite a change.
But I should say that NASA in particular has not been as supportive of the theoretical projects as we might think. There's really an institutional time and place for where theoretical and sort of dreamlike ideas can be embraced by NASA, and it's not always to the designer's advantage. It's usually to the engineer's advantage, you know, because it's all about designing for maximum efficiency and cost effectiveness in the end of the day, and being a governmental organization.
That's why we're very, no, at least I was personally very surprised that our scheme was selected.
Sono-san, is NASA going to support the project to realize?
Well, the competition brief stated that this was for 2035, I mean, around for mission, and it's, this is the first phase, which is the design phase, and there will be 2 more phases. Next one is structural, third one is fabrication, the 3D printing. So it's part of this whole 20-year project, so that's what was on the competition brief. So that's why
NASA,
we're very excited to submit. Yes. But
NASA,
then they
NASA promised to do it.
That was stated on the
Yes, it is written in their documents.
They had an issue with the sponsor. They stopped for a year already for the second phase. So, but they're starting up again, I think so. But,
in the exhibition of Moriarty Museum, there is another competition going on in NASA, and that's a small vehicle transported to the moon, and then the vehicle has to run 500 meters, and then pick up something and come back, something like that. And if it won, if someone wins, the award is $2,000 million or something like that.
wow. Yeah.
Did you have some award, some kind of
Very
cash
meager
award?
That's 20,000.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
wasn't enough. We
wasn't
broke even.
It wasn't nearly that big, but it was more. But they said the second phase has 1.1 million, right? And the third as well, so 2.2 total. But anyway, so on the brief they stated that so after the third phase is done, they would do the actual prototype fabrication full scale and have the 4 astronauts live there for a year to train before going to Mars. So that was there's like a whole kind of a plan that's laid, and we're very excited. But yeah, we're hoping it's going to.
So maybe Zach would like to join the next team.
Yeah, I had some ideas for those farms you had. Yeah, get some different stuff going. Well, I wanted to return to the optimism thing or culture maybe for a minute, because in Joito, his talk, I was really trying to get these guys to acknowledge this. And one of the things I love about starting to dream in space is its symbolic value. So I've never paid for an app on my phone in life, but I just did a month ago. And all it does is tell you how many humans are in space at this moment. And there's something gorgeous about this phone, this technology, which I kind of have a love-hate relationship with my phone, that now instead of going and looking at news sites about the US presidential election that make me depressed, I just look for this number. And it changed this week from 3 to 5. Right? It's all this app does, because two Chinese went up. And there's something so unimaginably beautiful about that simple number. How many humans are in space right now? And that's something that keeps me going now, and like really want to take on this research and dream about growing and cooking in space. It's just a very simple thing that most humans can get behind. And yeah, okay, it's driven by the space race and military and all that, but I think there is still something about that desire for exploration and all the facets of it, whether it's engineering, computing, agriculture, cuisine, visual arts, that space still has a power and hold on us.
I'd like to tell a very brief story. I was teaching a course last year at Pratt Institute, and as part of the midterm, we received some feedback from NASA engineers who are collaborating with us on the course, and it was proposed to have a sort of hydroponic garden in space, and one of the responses from the engineers was, how can you quantify the benefit of seeing things grow in space? And they weren't convinced just by virtue of the fact that you would have, food and growing things around you. And so we realized that there was a huge barrier to entry when it comes to instigating these sorts of ideas in space programs.
And how did you guys, on such a little budget, get all these people together from so many fields and convince them that you, as somewhat outsiders, had a story to tell and they should help you? Weren't they just like, Why are you using this weird geometry? It'd be easier if it's symmetrical. Why are you doing ice? You've clearly made some cultural choices that aren't efficient.
Right.
So how did you convince them of,
I think a part of that is just by virtue of being a designer, you engage people and you deal with those sorts of compromises and decisions in your everyday practice.
Or you take Tom's approach and just ask for forgiveness, like the astronaut who I showed who smuggled his seeds on. He told us, I don't know if it's true, he said he just smuggled them on in his kit and didn't tell mission control, which I think is as ballsy as axing up the wooden floor in the armory. Yeah.
Well, you have to just go ahead and do stuff, because if you ask for permission, you'll just get caught up in the bureaucracy. But what's interesting about all three of our space programs is that they're all real. I mean, maybe we're not on other planets yet, but you only get to other planets by working really hard. It's sort of like the martial artist who trains his whole life, and one day he's attacked in an alley, and he knows he could defeat the 6 assailants because he's a teacher by now, and he runs. And then on his deathbed, he looks back on his life and he realized he had never really been in a fight. And he understood that his life was about training. So whether we go to other planets or not, the work's exactly the same. It almost doesn't matter. But I mean, obviously, it totally matters. We're competitive monsters, and we're going to get there. But
I have one question. Why do you think human being wants to go to the space?
Well, I think it's if we look back at the very first slide that Melody showed,
because
which is
it's a very fundamental question.
Yeah.
If the robotics are very refined, you can send a robot. You don't have to go by yourself, right?
Yeah.
Robots
And
are
if you want to get some resource in the moon or somewhere, you can send a robot and bring it back.
Yes.
Why do you want to go? And you may change your body, maybe. One astronaut said to me that someday, maybe we cannot live on Earth. That's why we're preparing for that time.
Right.
But what do you think about
I mean, there's so many answers to that. I heard Buzz Aldrin said to me once that the dinosaurs didn't have rockets. And I thought that was such a cynical approach, meaning that he's saying we fucked up this planet, we need a new one, which to me is crazy. You go to other worlds to understand the resources here on Earth and how to better manage them. But it's a couple of things. It's that, and it's also that if you send a robot to Mars, like we landed this awesome Mars Science Laboratory called Curiosity that's still walking around. Does anyone know or care? I mean, in this room, probably a lot of people do, but that's an exception. In The Right Stuff, Tom Wolfe uses the expression, no Buck Rogers, no bucks, meaning if you don't put a person there, it's not sexy enough to get the money for the next mission. And people are sexy. We reproduce, and we can identify with a person who walked on the moon, an astronaut. They're rock stars. And robots they're getting better all the time.
Well, they're super rock stars, but also generally, most of the astronauts I've seen speak or talk to are very humble and generous as well. And you don't expect that from rock stars. And I think another reason to go in space, maybe unintended reason, is it's a form of brainwashing. Maybe it's like our brains are being washed in cosmic radiation, I don't know. But when people come back, they see the Earth differently. And I think one of the things they bring back is new thoughts and the memories they have, and that produces new culture. And that's maybe an unexpected thing, right? Like that these astronauts come back and they often convert to some kind of spiritual or deeply ecological way of being. So one reason for us to go is to have those thoughts, to stare back at ourselves, and to come back changed and sort of maybe spread that culture.
There's a word for that transformation, right? I just met Mike Massimino. I had dinner with him a couple of nights ago, and he talked about this moment where they said, hey, what are you doing right now? And it's like, I'm screwing the Hubble back together. He's like, can it wait 20 minutes? And like, well, why? What do you mean? And they said, turn around and look at the Earth. You've got 4 minutes and 59 seconds. And he said that, and this is a really humble kind of salt of the earth guy, and he said that he experienced that. There's a word, and we should know it. If anyone knows it, yell it out.
Overview effect. All right. Yeah.
And that is a transformation. And I think it's worth comparing that with the golden age of polar exploration in your first slide, where you talked, where there are people like Shackleton and Amundsen and Scott and Perry who would go to the poles for the glory of being the first. And some of them were just about getting there and getting back, and some of them had the idea of science behind it. And then, of course, it was the age where they could make a living doing tours. It was a potentially lucrative thing. It's different now, but I think if you get back to the core of it, of going there first, the first man gets the oyster, the second man gets the shell.
Yeah, I think that kind of a symbolic quality of having a person, reach there as a nation. I mean, it's a very, I think, political act, and it's very powerful. I think instead of having a rover or a robot, but I think also it's just pragmatic, because if you send I think personally, it's just more efficient to find new things, stumble into something, make mistakes, chance mutations. So I think robots, they're the limit. Like we can do virtual reality and communicate. We work in different countries and do whatever, the Skype, and it's just not the same. If you go and see the site, I have to see the site to design my architecture. It's impossible.
It's a hard sell. It's not convincing, but a person.
Yes. Okay, now there are not much time left, so maybe we should open the question to the floor. もし質問があったら
If you have got any questions from the floor, maybe you have already started the interaction from the stage to the audience, but if you have got any questions or comments, please raise your hand. Any questions, please? Somebody from the second row, please.
Hi, my name is Ariel Ekbla. I'm from the Media Lab, and I had a question for the ice-Mars structure. Did you guys think about what the duration of it would be in that particular location because of some limitation of the ice deposit? So is it going to eventually be a mobile structure that tracks around and has to go to the next area of the Martian landscape where you have sufficient ice, or would you transition once the ice has gone to some other fiber structure?
We were not exactly imagining this as a mobile or a scalable habitat just yet, although I think it would be important to consider that for the first Martian settlements, absolutely. In terms of the time it would take to actually construct the habitat and to mine for water ice in order to compose the overall shell, that's something that we've continued in our collaboration with Langley recently, and we've been looking into exactly how long it would take, and it would be a number of years. We've realized, but we don't see that as a sort of like inhibitory constraint at this point, because we are a number of years away from going to Mars. So.
And also, once they manage to build it, actually, for for the economy purpose, they have to use, for several groups, not just once, but they have to use, numbers of times to make it financially make sense out of it. So that's kind of their plan. It's an outpost, but they would, use multiple crews. And then eventually, if it's ice, it'll be the most beautiful ruin, I think. So, and the clean ruin.
Just additional information is that we had an exhibition of Norman Foster in January this year. And in that exhibition, Norman Foster made a presentation of the architecture on the moon. And that one, the part of the presentation is actually shown in the exhibition now. And that idea is using the soil of the moon, burning the soil with the laser and make a shell.
That's right. We were absolutely opposed to that method.
Why?
Because it's been done before. And frankly, it was an architectural competition, and we acknowledged the fact that we wanted to do something to really progress the idea of what a habitat is. I mean, you can live underground on Earth. You can. And you can live in a cave on Earth. But an ice structure would be absolutely unique to Mars.
I think that was very innovative, and when it came out, I was very fascinated with the Moon project, with the ESA. I think only one kind of point we really wanted to make was like Melody mentioned, it was just a cave, the tiny like a submarine windows, and it just inside is so deep, it's not a place people would want to live in if you're on Earth, right? So I think our point was we wanted to just build something that people want to live.
It's very uplifting.
Yeah, just normal, just be normal, and just try to design like we do here, and that was kind of our motivation toward the prototype.
You use the word beauty in your presentation, Zach, and the beauty of the forums is inspirational. I mean, you have to want to go. We've all seen The Martian and seen the horror and misery of it, and that was a great expression of it. But to inspire people to take that trip.
Any other questions from the floor? はい、真ん中にいらっしゃる方。
Somebody in the middle, please.
My name is Yokomori. I'm teaching art history at university. That this morning I received a message from airplane of their Tom SACHS, and then I want to quote for you. And I believe we must constantly push the boundaries of what we can achieve. I think, yes. And I would like to ask all of you, what is the most difficult boundaries? What do you have to, the resolve? Yes, for your recent research.
To everybody, to all the participants. Yes.
The most difficult boundaries we had to, did you hear that?
For your research, or for your work.
Somehow I make my money occasionally teaching interaction design, and I love teaching, but we're in a moment where imaginations are so limited, and especially young people, getting them to open their imaginations right now is my biggest challenge. That's why I try to at least use humor and make things ridiculous. And when I heard this morning, Bhutan is very specific conditions, so we can't do that, the gross national happiness. I thought, we're in very specific conditions, and they're totally weird. And so anything I can do to get young people to open up their imaginations and dream bigger and more ethically, I would love to do. I'm coming off a class right now, so that's what's on my mind. But that's my research challenge at this moment, yeah.
Oh my God, what isn't a challenge? I think finding an audience that can appreciate the power of design in an aerospace context and in an engineering context is the most challenging factor right now. Because I think maybe I mentioned this in the presentation, there isn't a sensitivity to the power of design in every which example. Generally speaking, when it comes to habitat interiors, the approach is that the overall structure and engineering is completed, and then it becomes a matter of outfitting that structure and that concept. But I think one of the powers of design is really to question the assumptions in engineering in order to really progress and introduce new and innovative and, advanced concepts of what it means to build and what it means to inhabit a structure in space.
Yeah, I don't know, I mean, working in architectural design is like every day is like a series of avalanche of, mini disasters and problems and issues with boundaries, or, collaborating with, a lot of different consultants and different teams. So just a lot, but I think, for instance, in this context, so we had, we are continuing to design with the Langley, the research center for the ice shelter, and this, because the competition, we were kind of a prime team, right? So we have our design and we have the subs in the consultants, but we are kind of managed to control them. But for this time, it's more difficult, or it's more have to be compromises in a way, because we're working for the real project and a real team of engineers, and they're kind of the prime, we're their design consultants in a way. So it's kind of a different kind of a setup, and like we showed a little bit, it's not as kind of a it's a different kind of geometry, let's say, as what we propose for our competition, right? So yeah, that's. But I think it's just a different rules, and just yeah, I think that's our. We just can't. We just have to keep pushing and can't compromise, because the reason we managed to propose what we did was that, like I showed the slide, that we gave up once. Okay, with the ice sublimit, we can't solve it. Gave up, spent 3 weeks on Regulus, but 3 days before the first submission, we said we were stubborn enough to come back and explore ice and make it work. So I think that was critical, and that's the mentality that we need, because we get beat up all the time from all directions, financially, schedules, consultant, engineers, but we just can't give up and keep doing, and sometimes it works. So I think that.
はい、曽根さん。
すみません。どうもすみません。
その上
Do I have time to answer?
Short.
Bricolage is the act of repairing or building with available limited resources. I think it's used in France to describe do-it-yourself home repair type stuff. But I think you could look at any space program as using the limits of the resource, going all the way. And my ultimate resource is my body, the physical structure of it, how little time I have to achieve all that we're trying to do in a day, in a lifetime. And so I'm gonna choose my flesh.
Maybe bricolage of technology is also interesting. Yeah?
Well,
it's
I mean,
like a patchwork of the technology.
I think yeah, absolutely, putting things together.
We should not continue.
Okay.
We have to finish, but
to be continued.
So, はい。
It is not a story that we can reach a conclusion, but to go into outer space in itself is science and technology in principle. However, if there are humans, they always accompany culture and art. Art and culture becomes important when humans get involved. That is my conclusion. Thank you.